We are talking with Millicent Poole today, and now we want to hear about her book entitled, What Are You Running From? All right, Millicent, this is an interesting book title. Talk to us about it, and what inspired you to write
What
it?
are you really running from? First of all, God
Okay.
gave me this title, and I could not have thought of a better title. It really grew out of a message. I was asked to speak at a women's event,
Okay.
and they asked me to speak on a woman of the Bible. And because, you know me, Sherry, I want to do
Yeah.
something different. I
Yes,
didn't
ma'am.
want to talk about Esther or Ruth or Naomi.
Yes,
I wanted
Lord.
to talk about someone different.
Yes.
And Hagar struck me because she reminds me of an average, everyday woman, a woman who works hard and wants significance and meaning on her job.
Amen.
And as a result of that event, and it was just amazing. When I stood up there to deliver that message, I felt like a bull locked in a pen. It was like I couldn't get that message out quick
Yes,
enough.
girl.
And amazing how the altar call came in after that message. And so I just knew God was all over that message.
Praise the Lord.
And then shortly after that, God said, I want you to turn that into a book. And I was like, what? A book? And it was just amazing. And so around that same time, when God asks you to do things, you're really busy. It's never a perfect time.
Never.
And when he called me to write that book, I was having problems in my marriage. I was having problems on the job. I was showing up on the job every day just to pay the mortgage.
Amen, sister.
And at the same time, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He had lymphoma. And
Yes.
I was flying back and forth to Alabama to visit with him and seeing my dad suffering from, the chemo and weight loss and depression. And that day he had went to a cold blue. Mm-hmm. And watching my dad nearly slip through my hands, it was like frightening for me. And they push us out the room, when the doctors come in and they start doing the heart compressions, my mind was saying, okay, it's time for him to go. But my spirit was like, no. And so I left that room and I went to the chapel in the hospital. And I said, well, Lord, if it's time, because my dad went through a journey of these chemo treatments and all this depression. And I went to the chapel and I said, well, God, I said, if it's your will for my dad to go, let me know. And help me to release him from that.
Right.
I said, but if it's not his time, I'll stand firm on that. And so came back to the room. He was in ICU. And they moved him to another room. He was in ICU on a ventilator. And you had different friends come in, want to pray over, and they were praying as if they were releasing him. And my spirit was not in agreement with that.
Of course
And
not.
so that night, the next morning, my brother and I went in the room, just he and I. And I said, Jay, I want to lead us in prayer. My dad was unconscious. He was hooked up to the ventilator. And I prayed the Lazarus prayer. I've never done that before. I said, Lord, I know you raised Lazarus from the dead. And I know you are living and you are real. And if you could do one thing for your daughter, I want to pray the same power that raised Lazarus up, raise it in my dad. And girl, it was just amazing. It was powerful. So I flew back to Dallas. I emailed my prayer warriors. I said, every day at noon, we're going to pray for my dad.
Yes.
The next day, let me tell you, girl, my son, my cousin from Alabama, I call him son.
Okay.
Son called me. He said, sis. He called me sis. He said, sis, you're not going to believe what happened. I said, what? He said, your dad is off the ventilator, and he's sitting up in the bed wearing his favorite baseball hat.
Glory to God.
The next day, David, the next
Prayer
day.
changes things.
Yes. And so, when I came back to Dallas, I was all pumped up. I said, okay, I can write this book.
Right.
I was telling everybody I'm going to write this book. God told me to write this book. That was month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, still no book. Haven't even started, just talking. Hagar, you know the story about her being called to birth the babe for Abraham and Sarah. And as a result, when she got pregnant, then she was put out the house. She ran to God in the desert, the God who hears. And in that, God said, go back and submit to Sarah.
Yes, she did.
Now, the reason she was out in the desert was because of Sarah.
The hater wife who knew that, okay, I'm back.
Yeah. It's real. And so when God told her to go back and submit to Sarah,
yes.
then he said, when you go back, your son
yes.
that you carry, he will be a father of a great nation.
Blessed. Yes.
When she went back, now just imagine, you're going to you're coming out of a difficult relationship. You got somebody on a job you don't want to deal with. You got some people you don't want to deal with. And God said, no, you're going to stay right here until it's time to let you go.
Yes, he did.
She went back, but when she went back, she came back with another attitude. She came out stronger. She came back with a different perspective.
Good stuff.
And so what happens when we see the bigger picture, instead of focusing on that one person, God wants you to see the bigger picture. And when you know what God has called you to do, you don't always focus on this little thing. You focus on where I'm going beyond it.
Watch the Sherry Bronson Show on your RoKu television or RoKu streaming stick. We are sharing stories of grace, redemption, and salvation to the glory of God. Share with your friends and stay connected.